As a fitness professional, you know the joy of helping others, and you know it's more than just fitness. We're training the whole person. Wellness coaching provides expertise that goes beyond fitness and nutrition. It's a holistic approach to helping others become their best selves while reaching their goals. To us, there's no greater joy than that. Join the fitness leader. Become a fitness leader. Become a certified wellness coach. Go to nasm.org/wellness.
You're listening to the Mindful Drinking Podcast with Derek Brown on the NASM Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Mindful Drinking Podcast, where we talk about mindful drinking, no and low alcohol cocktails, and social wellness. I'm your host, Derek Brown. I am a certified wellness coach with NASM. I'm also an award-winning bartender, and I wrote a couple books on the history of cocktail and on non-alcoholic and low alcohol cocktails. And today I'm going to talk about aliens. So we're now a complete conspiracy channel. No, I'm just kidding. I am going to talk about aliens, but I'm going to start with the alien secretion. The alien secretion is a cocktail, actually, and it turns out that it's the first cocktail that I ever made. And I'm going to tell you what's in it, but I would not recommend making it. It is made with equal parts spiced rum, melon liqueur, and canned pineapple juice. And I did try it with fresh pineapple juice, and that somehow made it grosser, if you can even imagine that. So the alien secretion comes out, and it is a bright green color. And the reason I made it is because it was before I was a bartender, and a friend of mine was having a birthday party. And I thought, hey, I don't really know how to bartend at that time. I just took a big plastic pitcher, and it's at equal parts. So I poured equal parts into it. I don't even remember if I used ice or not. And we drank it, and we had a lot of fun. But I will also say that it probably led to some painful moments the next morning. And for that reason alone, maybe it's not worth drinking, but also it's a bit saccharine and sweet. Now, what that cocktail got me thinking about is aliens. And so we're going to go back into that topic. And there's a lot of discussion around that recently, right? You have UFOs being renamed as UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, and the Navy and government sources are starting to talk about these existing. And there's plenty of documentaries out there. And instead of them being with sort of people with really big hair and crazy ideas, it's turning out to be, people who worked on these programs. And I don't know the answer whether aliens exist or not. That we can't answer today. But I do want to use it to pose a thought question. And that question is this: if aliens were to land in the United States, or anywhere in the world really, but let's say in the United States, and we were to invite them to a diplomatic function or dinner, let's say, would we serve them alcohol? And it's a great question. Besides the fact that we don't know their biology, maybe they can't drink alcohol, but let's say that they could and that their biology was not dissimilar to ours. Then there's sort of two extreme views on this, right? And one of them, I'm going to quote from the 1940s, an author named David Embry. And it's a really beautiful quote, but it is about a well-made cocktail and his belief on what the well-made cocktail offers. He says, "The well-made cocktail is the most gracious of drinks. It pleases the senses, the shared delight of which of those who partake in common of this refreshing nectar breaks the ice of formal reserve. Taut nerves relax, taut muscles relax, tired eyes brighten, tongues loosen, friendships deepen, and the whole world becomes a better place in which to live." Well, maybe sometimes, but it's a really wonderful utopian kind of view. Now, on the other hand, we have somebody from a little earlier in the 19th century, Lyman Beecher, talking about some of the problems with alcohol. And he calls it intemperance. And intemperance is just a way of saying drinking, temperance being a way of controlling the way you drink, but intemperance being drinking out of control. And he says, this is a glowing description of the sin of intemperance. None but the pencil of inspiration could have thrown upon the canvas so many and such vivid traits of this complicated evil in so short a compass. It exhibits its woes and sorrows, contentions and babblings, and wounds and redness of eyes, its smiling deceptions in the beginning and serpent bite in the end, the helplessness of its victims, like one cast out upon the deep, the danger of destruction, like that of one who sleeps upon the top of a mast, the unavailing lamentations of captive, and the giving up of hope and effort. That's a little intense. Both of them are intense. But, this is how humanity sees it. On one hand, you have this beverage that's been part of human consumption and our human ancestors for over 10 million years. And it's possibly the progenitor of religion and agriculture. If you didn't listen to my podcast on alcohol and evolution with Dr. Edward Slingerland, please do. There's a lot there. And it's a crucial aspect of our social experience, no doubt, and a prized, welcome part of gastronomic dining experiences. On the other hand, it contributes to the death of over 3 million people per year worldwide, according to the WHO. And that's about 5% of all deaths worldwide through cancer and poisoning and car crash and heart failure and liver disease and violence. And I don't want to be too much of a bummer, but this is all, statistically true. And what's worse is that many of these are preventable. Now imagine that alien sitting at the table. No, but go ahead, take a sip. I'm sure you'll love it. It's really a conundrum. And I think that one that is important to think about. Now, reverse the situation. Let's say that alcohol did not exist on Earth, that essentially aliens were to bring alcohol to us. Now, what would happen then? Would we integrate it in society in the same way if it didn't have the socio-cultural experience that it does have? This 10 million years as part of human and our human ancestors' evolution, if it wasn't part of our social experiences, would we just welcome it in society, or would it become part of the Schedule 1 drugs? These are the drugs that are the most controlled. We're talking about, and this, obviously there's different opinions on these, but these are the Schedule 1 drugs. There's marijuana, heroin, LSD, psilocybin, or AK mushrooms. I think that as much as I would like to land on the side that we would not prohibit it, I'm pretty sure we would if it didn't have that context. And that is obviously something that we have done. The United States effectively prohibited and it's important, the sale, transportation, and manufacture of alcohol. So you could possess it. In fact, my great-grandfather was a police officer in DC and actually had made alcohol in the house. And so, it is something that you could have, and there were small amounts of it let in. But between 1919 and 1933, the manufacture, sale, or transportation was banned. So this is something that happened, but that's not the first time it happened. During the Han Dynasty in China to around 200 BC, there were a variety of laws that were passed to control consumption. And it was outright banned at one point in terms of production of it. And that was, a long time ago. The Aztec culture, pre-Columbian Mexico, there were very clear rules for how you consumed it. And drinking was only permitted on religious occasions, and the amount that you drink was restricted, and sometimes at the penalty of death. Now, closer to our time and before prohibition in the United States, Iceland actually was the first European country to pass prohibition in 1915, followed by Finland and Norway. And you might not imagine this because I think we have a stereotype in the United States about Russian drinkers, but both the Russian Empire and Soviet Union, for brief stints, banned alcohol. And even Canada banned alcohol from 1918 to 1920. And that was a temporary wartime measure, but it happened. And so there are even countries that we associate. I guess the Soviet Union and the Russian Empire be one, but France we associate with the kind of the good life, drinking wine with dinner and that sort of thing. They might not have prohibited or banned wine, but they did prohibit absinthe. In 1905, there was a Swiss peasant named Jean Lefray who murdered his family. Terrible, terrible thing. And it was blamed on absinthe. And in fact, there were a few other instances where this was blamed on absinthe. Now, it didn't help that this person obviously, drank and had a problem, alcohol use problem, and many other things going on that we don't know about. It was blamed on absinthe. And so many countries, European countries and in America, banned absinthe. And in some cases, it was because they said it created hallucinations. And that is, it turns out, not true in the amount of this one compound, thujone, that is in absinthe. It's in fact, the alcohol is going to get you there quicker than the thujone. So anyway, absinthe was banned in the US until 2007. Now you can go get your Sazerac, which is a drink from New Orleans that has absinthe. But yeah, that was all in the past, right? Well, you're listening to the Mindful Drinking Podcast, and my name is Derek Brown. We are talking about banning alcohol. Not that that's something I'm recommending, but it's something that's happened. And we are talking about the history of it, going all the way back to ancient China, the Aztecs, throughout Europe, leading up to the United States. And some alcohols were even banned until 2007. But that's all in the past, right? I mean, we've moved beyond that. Well, during COVID in South Africa, they banned alcohol. And it's because alcohol consumption is strongly associated with violence-related trauma admissions into the hospital. So they were trying to make room for COVID patients by banning alcohol. Whether that was successful or not, you'd have to dig a little deeper. And for those of you who watched the World Cup match in 2022 in Qatar, then you would have seen that alcohol was banned in the stadiums. They had non-alcoholic beers. And so there were licensed establishments around that where you could drink, but it was banned during the match, which seems, I think, to a lot of soccer fans and a lot of sports fans heretical, but it is true. And there are still countries that ban alcohol, many countries, including countries like Afghanistan and Saudi Arabia. So prohibition is something that exists to this day, but not in the United States, right? Okay, I'm just going down and kind of disproving all of these assumptions we have about prohibition. But in the United States, there are laws that prohibit the sale, consumption, and sometimes possession of liquor. So there are two states, Kansas and Tennessee, that are entirely dry, meaning no alcohol by default. You can get the sale and possession of alcohol. You can get it authorized. And so it's not incredibly hard to do, but the default is dry. And then there are plenty of counties throughout the United States where it's entirely dry, including Moore County, which is where Jack Daniel's distillery is located. Yeah, Jack Daniel's, this whiskey, this Tennessee whiskey that is one of the most consumed liquors in the world, headquarters of where it's made, is in fact illegal to purchase it there. So one of the interesting parts is it doesn't really matter if it's a dry county or it's prohibited. Everywhere in the world where there is a coherent government body, and let's be clear, I do understand that there are some lawless areas of the world still, or ones that are, maybe it's hard to enforce those laws, but in without, you know, besides general lawlessness, there is some kind of prohibition on alcohol. In the United States, for instance, if you are 18 years old, can you consume alcohol? No, you can't. If you're in Washington, D.C., if it's 3:05, you can consume alcohol in your house, but you've got to leave the bars. You cannot be in the bars anymore. And so I think that that is an interesting aspect of it. Even in some countries, it's prohibited by age. It's prohibited by religion. Like in certain dominant Muslim countries, Muslims are not allowed to drink, but people of other faiths are. It is certain time frames that it's prohibited. And so all this just to prove that prohibition is still alive and well. It's still a common part of our experience, even if we don't have the flappers and the machine gun toting, pinstripe wearing mafia types. These are much glamorized in Hollywood, but it obviously was a murderous and terrible time. So I don't want to glamorize that at all. So because of those images, though, you also might think that prohibition equals crime, right? So that if something is prohibited, it's going to increase the crime on that. And that may or may not be true, but it is much debated. It's not incredibly clear, even though it is kind of something that we say all the time. And prohibition, look, I'm going to say this before I say this next thing. I'm not necessarily in favor of prohibition. That's not what I'm saying. But prohibition did lead to some positive health outcomes, including reduce in liver cirrhosis and liver deaths. And that's a common metric that they use to determine people's drinking. And so I think that when we think of prohibition and we think of it as this monolithic thing that happened one time between 1919 and 1933 in the United States by one act that was finally repealed, it's not accurate. That it's happened for a very long time and throughout the world. And as long as alcohol has existed, there's been people trying to ban it. And so I think this is what one paper that I read by a historian who's an expert on temperance said. I love this quote. He said, from a historical perspective, no prediction is certain and no path is forever barred, not even the return of alcohol prohibition in some form. But he also goes on to say why the historical context matters, which I think is just so interesting. What we're seeing here is that prohibition has been around in many different forms for a long time, and that even though we have a lot of assumptions from it, some of which come from Hollywood, some of which come from just information that's passed back and forth, there really is an existing prohibition on alcohol in certain ways, in certain places, certain times, certain people that exists already. And if an alien, let's go back to the initial question. If an alien came down here and we were to serve them, would we serve it to them? Would we even offer that? Or we would say, okay, maybe we'll just choose a really nice kombucha, hoping that, that kombucha is not bad for their biological systems. So I think what's important to recognize out of that is not necessarily, and I'm not coming to the conclusion one way or the other that we should prohibit alcohol as a whole. Actually, I probably would generally think, no, that's a bad idea. I think we have to look into it more and we have to consider that because there's many things at stake, including our freedoms and the question of whether we should be able to do things like that, which I think is a whole moral can of worms that I would love to address, but I cannot address on the remaining 5-10 minutes that we have. So maybe another episode we will talk about that. But for now, what I think it should bring up, and I hope that it brings up in you to some extent, is the fact that maybe as an individual, we should think more about our relationship with alcohol. If it has had this long history where it's been contested, when it's been banned, when it's been, certain types of alcohol and so forth, maybe we should think more about our own personal relationship with alcohol. And for some people, clearly that means that they're going to stop drinking, right? So they say, okay, I'm not really happy with my relationship, so I'm going to consider knocking it out. Maybe that's for a temporary period, maybe that's forever. But that the thought process is, let me explore this and see how I feel without alcohol. For some of us, that means that we're going to moderate our drinking or just change our drinking patterns into something maybe on a Friday night. Instead of going out and just drink after drink after drink, we're going to adopt a mindful drinking mindset where we alternate drinks, or maybe we stick to non-alcoholic drinks in the beginning. There's lots of different options, all of which I've talked about in previous episodes, especially the one on mindful drinking, on how to drink mindfully. I think you'll find a lot there if you go back and listen to it, especially the acronym RATE, which stands for replace, avoid, temper, and elicit help. And if you want to know more about that, you're going to have to go back to that episode. And then for some of us, that means that we adopt something that just fits our own personal goals, because in many ways, it's not just about how you want to drink, but it's how you want to feel. And I think that that's a really important part of it. So should alcohol be illegal? I don't really think so, but I do think that it's a inquiry that's worth going through and trying to understand, so that we can apply that to our own individual circumstances and think through what alcohol means to us. And so that's it for today. I'm really grateful that you joined us, but I do want to say that if you enjoyed this program, which I hope you did, then I would love to hear about it. Your ears are very important to us, and what you have to say is very important to us. So I would love for you to add a comment if you enjoy the program. If you did not enjoy the program, I prefer you don't leave a comment. No, I'm just kidding. Please leave whatever comment you think is important to leave. Like, subscribe, and listen to some of the other ones, especially Alcohol and Evolution and What is Mindful Drinking. Otherwise, I'm grateful you joined us today on the Mindful Drinking Podcast, and I will hope to see you again.